Sure. So I'm Emily Schooley, and I am now 41. So when I was growing up, I was actually raised by my grandparents. So I was raised kind of with a generation older than what you would think, like parents in their 30s, 40s. But it was never something that was really discussed, I think, in my household, in any of even like teen magazines I would get at the time, nothing like that. It was more just, you just kind of move on and do your day to day life. I would say so. And it was very much like my grandfather was always somebody that would go and build things with his hands. So even like when I was living there, like he, built me like a little tree fort. He built me like a little swimming pool. So seeing someone like, even though he had retired, he was still very active and like getting up at like 6 a.m. every day, going for a nature walk. And like, I have never been a get up at 6 a.m. girl and never will be. But yeah, it gave me a lot more appreciation for, especially now, like looking back, going, okay, well, you were only 20, 25 years older than I am now, and seeing like how much they still did, like how still busy they kept. Like my grandma had a pretty active social life as well. So like even just going out seeing friends. And I think it is very much to that kind of idea of like age is more of a number. And you can be 40 and be very unwell, unfit, or you can be 40 and feel like you're 20. And then same thing for like 60, 70 as well. I think the only thing about aging that scares me is just the idea of like slowly losing function in your body, where it's like I've always been someone who's very much a doer, and I always like to push myself to see how much I can do, what I can accomplish. So, the idea of even just like keeping myself healthy and like eating as well as I can, working out regularly. I hear a lot, like I do some physiotherapy. I had a shoulder injury a couple of years ago, and they always say like motion is lotion. So to me, it's like, I don't care about the number. I care about how I feel in my body. I think there's definitely a lot of outside pressure within the entertainment industry for women to be young, be thin, still be a little bit compliant. And I am happy to push back against all of those things. Where like for me as well, like I'm someone like I've never done Botox. I've never invested in a lot of the things that I think a lot of people do now. And it's just, I always say like to each their own. If there's something that's going to make you feel better, absolutely go do it. But I think just having even something like that so normalized, like even girls in their 20s getting Botox, like it's such a huge, maybe not necessarily a waste of money, but it is definitely a big expense. And I wonder, how much of the entertainment industry is really about whether it's not so overt, but it's very covert and subtle. It's like women that don't feel good in their bodies are going to spend more money on diet culture, on workout, on cosmetic surgery, on, things like snail slime to make you stay young. And again, it could be good or bad. It's your personal choice. But I think a lot of like we're also really, really conditioned by who we see on screen and how we see them represented, because that leads to how we see, think, approach people in real life. So, even just by the same token, like if we don't see women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that are capable main characters in their own life, if we only see older women in context of, oh, they're a mom, maybe they're a nurse, maybe they're a doctor, we're also going to, like, we as women are going to think less of ourselves because we don't see what we can be doing. Whereas, if we see a woman who's an astronaut, that's going to inspire, say, like little girls up to like, women of all ages going, okay, well, I can be in the sciences. I can look a certain way and still be treated well by the world. Like, and I think that's something too, just to address, where it's like people that are thinner or more conventionally attractive tend to be treated better by society. And I think there's a lot of room to push back against that as well, where we should be allowed to exist, to be quote unquote ugly, to be fat, to be old, whatever, and know that our inherent worth is not dictated by any number or any scale. We are all just worthy as we are as human beings. I think for me, something that's really helped is that I've had a lot of older friends when I was growing up. And again, too, like, kind of being around more like grandparents and people that were older, even when I was younger, it's like it really brought more diverse perspectives. Because like, even when I was a teenager, I would go and hang out with like 20 and 30-year-olds that were doing deeper writing or more creative projects than people my age. And then as well, it's like now I have, I have friends, I have peers that are in their teens and 20s. And for me as a 40-year-old woman, I can say, hey, I'm still cool. Yeah. In my head, I still feel like I'm in my 20s. But then I go, okay, well, I'm seeing some fine lines here. I'm seeing how my face has changed over the years. And it's like it's a different version of me is what it feels like. Where even something similar, like anytime, like if I changed my hairstyle or my hair color, it takes a little bit for it to feel like me again on the outside. But yeah, it's like I still see, the same passions, interests, things I love, people I love. I'm like, that's still kind of who I am in my soul. But yeah, the physical body just varies from day to day. It's kind of, the container my meat suit moves around in. Like, well, I think especially in North America, one of the ways that we really fail ourselves is just poor diet, poor food choices, high food prices for healthy food. And again, too, like I always have to question how much of this is intentional. Whereas if you look at something like, say, over in Japan, in their blue zones, how many people regularly live to age 100 plus? And those people are still healthy, they're still outgoing, they're still walking, 10, 20K, they're carrying their own groceries home. And it's, how do we approach conversations around healthcare here? How do all these systems feed into each other? And then even as well, something like gym culture being promoted for weight loss or to get fit, but it's still, especially for women, that's still very much a code for thinness, as opposed to approaching, okay, well, you'll feel better if you walk 5 kilometers a day, and just having that attitude. I think for me, it's like my dreams have a little bit more of a timeline now, whereas I'm a Pisces rising, so I'm a big astrology girly, and I've always been very comfortable just kind of float, and yes, there's things I want, but believe that they're going to happen at the right time. And I did put some pressure on myself when I was younger. It's like, oh, well, I used to think, for example, if I'm not famous as an actor by 25, my life would be over. But that relationship has kind of changed over time, where I will still aspire to, okay, well, I want to go hike the Camino over in Spain, for example. And I'm actually pushing myself, I think, to dream even bigger as I get older, going, okay, well, what else is possible? And especially now for me as well, like when I was younger, I didn't have the same level of self-confidence that I have now. So for me to go, okay, well, I now know what I'm worth. I now know what matters to me, my relationships, traveling, making my art, connecting with people that have similar points of view in the film industry and want to help me create these things. But it's also like, in a weird way, it's like getting older has given me more self-confidence, and that self-confidence has led me to a place where I can dream bigger and on a timeline than I did like when I was in my 20s. Yeah. I think that like we as a collective society put a lot of pressure and a lot of expectation onto early success, whereas I think, and especially for people that grew up with either trauma or any kind of like adverse younger life experiences, your best years, I think, will come when you are able to come to a place of who you are. And people that have started out with more advantages in life. So, people that had 2 parents, were solidly middle class or better, maybe their best years are, high school, their 20s, their 30s. But I think for people, it's just your life path is going to be different because of how you were raised, because of, whatever privileges you had or didn't coming into the world. And something that I really wish we did more of was normalize more success later on in life. Because, we hear the occasional story like, oh, Mary Kay was 42 when she founded her cosmetics, or I think it was 42, I don't remember the exact number. And then compare those very few lone scarce stories with how many 20 under 20 lists we have, or like 30 under 30. And just like, I think we do ourselves such a disservice by saying, oh, you can only accomplish things if you're young, or you can only, come to a place of like worldwide recognition if you start in your teens or 20s or whatever. And whereas I think like some people, you're going to grow into a life that becomes more beautiful when you hit middle age and beyond, because that's a point where, you're finally settled, you're able to do more than survive and come to a point of thriving. I think I'm really looking forward to seeing how the world's going to continue to change. because it's like we're in this really, really interesting, very fertile but very volatile time period right now. And it's like the way that I grew up, like we still had a rotary phone in my house. We still had one of those old black and white TVs that you had to like turn the knob to adjust. And to go from that to, you know, streaming services and just the way that, you know, the internet is, like we can connect with anybody around the world now. Where are we going to be in another 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever years? And then also, you know, making sure that I keep myself healthy enough to outlive my enemies and be able to see, always love a good joke, but just to be able to like see how the world's going to continue to change. And then I think as well, like for those of us, especially that came up, like I was the only queer kid in my high school back in the day, but I'm like to be able to kind of, I guess, give back to the world in a way as well with like sort of finding yourself in that position of eldership, of mentorship. I think that's going to be really important too, to like, as kids continue to come up, raised in these new ways, raised by technology, who's there to help create a better space for them. Like, yeah. And then animals as well, like us and the planet, we've got to get some things worked out, but yeah.